following video is from a vMix Funtime live show discussing the Obtanium Reference System.
As Tim mentioned earlier, we have a new reference system. We call it the Obtanium Reference System, and it is the top spec reference system that we recommend for vMix to do really high-end workflows. So let's take a look at it. All right, so the specs that we have here are it can handle 24 HD cameras or 6 4K and 4K up to 60p, which is a bit of a first for us to be recommending something at that high frame rate. It'll handle 12 HD or 6 4K NDI or SRT inputs. And I guess the other important things to be aware of are on the output capabilities. So you can do 4 HD or 1 4K 60 out. From your graphics card, you can do 2 HD or 1 4K 60 out as well. And then you can output a bunch of NDI as well. It's a fairly powerful system, and it's taken us quite a long time to come up with something because we had some challenging objectives. These were that we wanted to be able to handle 3 capture cards, which modern hardware, it's a little bit hard to do these days. We wanted to be able to offer you 4K 60 workflows and plenty of NDI, and we wanted to do it for a good price and make sure the parts are available.
So if you have been following vMix for any period of time, you'll know that we have typically tried to recommend high-end desktops like the X99 or X299 along the way. Now, those platforms are ridiculously old. Unfortunately, it meant that we haven't been able to bring out anything new because there was a huge jump in what they were offering up to their workstations and server parts and that type of thing. So it's been a very, very long process. We've tested basically all the parts, hard drives, graphics cards, CPUs, motherboards, cases, everything. We don't want you to think that we haven't spent years trying to come up with another computer to offer everybody. And we have spent long times testing everything. So we basically spent most of the best part of this year just testing these products alone to try and come up with a new solution for everybody. So that's just to preface this whole reference system. And if you have followed us for a while, you know that we have been talking about this for many, many, many years. And we get questions on the live show and via email asking, when are we going to be able to show a new reference system for the higher end?
So we ended up narrowing down to 2 different systems, and we ended up pushing the Xeon as the final system. The first system was a Threadripper 7000X series. So it's the lower end Threadrippers. It's not the Threadripper Pros of the most recent range. And the Xeon is the W2500X series, which is the lower end workstation Xeons. So let's have a look at the Threadripper first, and I'll explain to you what we were looking at and why it might still be a good option for you, but why we didn't end up putting it forward as a reference system. So looking at the CPU first, it had amazing specs. The CPU itself is an excellent product. Their base model CPU, which is the 7960X, it has 24 cores, base clock speeds that are crazy fast, 4.2 gigahertz, and 88 PCIe lanes. Going to the motherboard, this is where things sort of came a bit unstuck. So the motherboard offerings are somewhat limited. There aren't too many options out there. We ended up selecting the ASRock TRX 50WS, and the reason we picked that is because of the PCIe lane arrangement. If you have a look at those PCIe lanes there, the top one was used for the graphics card. The second one down is covered by the graphics card, and then from there on you had access to put in capture cards. Now, one of the issues there was that first capture card slot called PCIe slot 3, it was hard up against even the smallest high-end graphics card. The issue there is I was worried about airflow into your graphics card, keeping things cool, so we weren't sure whether you really should be putting a capture card in there for long-term runs. The other thing that sort of made this a challenging system was the storage drive at the top there. You can see there's 2 places for storage. The storage drive at the top was a little bit, because it was covered by the graphics card, it was sitting under the graphics card, it was a little bit hard to keep it cool. These M.2 drives get really quite warm because we're storing a lot of content on them. The other challenge was the CPU cooling. So adding a cooler to the CPU ended up for these TRX 50 range. So the TRX 50 is the chipset on the motherboard. For this range, there's a bracket that sits over the CPU, and that CPU bracket ends up sort of clashing. So the reason it clashes, and I'm going to try to show you this here. These are the bolts that you use to bolt down a cooler. So I'll zoom right in and hopefully it'll focus. There it is there. So these are the bolts. You can see they've got a big chunky piece on them. And the issue is that they tend to clash. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. I took a minute to draw up the bracket just so that you guys could understand what's going on. So here we've got the support bracket that sits over the top of the CPU and the bolt that goes into it. If I take you down and let's have a look at it. I'm going to zoom right in and I'm going to bring this bolt down. And you'll see that as you bring the bolt in, it clashes with the side of the bracket right there. And so you end up having to stop here and only do half of the thread. And we were not comfortable with that arrangement. And so that knocked out a boatload of the coolers that pretty much all of the range offered, except for the Noctua. The Noctua offered coolers that had straight through threads without those little, like the chunky piece. And that did allow you to use those, but it was very limited and it meant that you had to relocate fans on those coolers because those Noctua fans have the big heat sinks on them. They're very chunky. So it ended up being quite difficult to come up with a good cooling arrangement for those systems. And whatever we were going to put forward, you were going to have to make some modifications. We weren't too happy about that offering. The last thing that I want to cover off is probably the most important part that was what led us to not putting forward this offering, and that was the 10G port. So it's a Marvell, I think it's called Aquantia. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. And it is a lower cost 10G network card. It's a very good card. It can do 10G, absolutely, but it can't do it consistently. And normally that wouldn't be a problem because you send packets, stuff doesn't arrive, you tell the sender, oh, just resend it, and it comes. But with live workflows with NDI, that's not great. You need those packets to arrive, you need everything to be smooth. And we were seeing some frame drops that were not typical of a high-end workstation. So we went looking for a new system that had a better network card, something from Intel, because we'd had a lot of success with Intel network cards in the past. And our options were either Threadripper Pros, because they do actually have motherboards with Intel NICs, but unfortunately that's just getting into a very high price range. Alternatively, the low-end Xeons. So that's why we ended up looking at the Xeons. So this is the Obtanium build that we are putting forward. It is a W5-265X CPU. This CPU has 18 cores, so a few less cores, and 3.2 gigahertz base clock speed, so a little bit slower as well. But it does have 64 lanes of PCIe, which is great. You can add a lot of capture cards. Looking at the motherboard options, we've put forward the Gigabyte MW83 RP0. The reason we've put this one forward, similar to the previous that we were looking at, is the PCIe lane arrangement. Now, I'm just going to explain a little bit about the CPU and why this is a good arrangement for a CPU like this. The 2500 series CPUs, stick with me, are the baby to the 3500 series CPUs. The 3500 series CPUs offer heaps of PCIe lane support, and the 2500 offer about half the PCIe lane support. And in doing so, motherboards simply turn off particular PCIe slots. In this case, they turn off slot 6, 5, and 4 in the picture that you can see there. But that is fine because our graphics card is covering those anyway, so you can't get to them. So you can't put in capture cards, or at least not easily. And so because slots 3, 2, and 1 at the bottom are available for capture cards, and they're nice and gapped from the graphics card, you've got some good airflow there, and we think that this is a very good arrangement for a system. So That is one of the key reasons why we've gone with this system. The other one being that it has a different network adapter, which is the 10G network adapter from Intel, which is a X710, I think it's called, and it's performing quite well as well. So that arrangement combined with good storage, and that's another topic that I think I need to quickly talk about, has resulted in a very good system. So storage is something that we spent a very, very, very long time testing. The different M2 drives out there, they announce incredibly high speeds. We've actually spoken about this in previous episodes, but they have very, very high speeds, but they are sort of boost speeds. They're temporary, and once the drive fills up a little bit of its high-speed memory, it runs out of gas, and then you go back to slow speeds. So what we're looking for is high, sustained write speeds. And the best model out there that we've found is actually an older model called the Samsung 970 EVO Plus. We've been recommending this drive for quite some time. So until they stop making it, we're going to keep on recommending it for storing your content onto when you're doing really large replays or multi-chords. So we've put forward the 970 EVO Plus for that, and we've suggested a 990 Pro for your Windows and your vMix installation, so that you've got a nice snappy system running, but you're storing to something that really does a good job of storing constantly for a long period of time at those sustained write speeds. I think that's probably enough to talk about for today, but if you want to find out all the details about the system, we've gone to the effort of building a whole knowledge base article about this system, because it's really important that you build to the specs that we've noted. Use exactly the parts that we suggest if you want this to perform well, because if you deviate at all, you might find that you don't get the capacity that you expect. You might not be able to fit the capture cards you expect. You might not be able to power the graphics card because the power supply is not big enough. Things like that. So if you are looking to deviate, I would suggest please don't. If you really, really want to, you're going to have to come and talk to us. So reach out at support@vmix.com and we can talk about it. But we really do recommend, if you're looking for a high-end system, stick to this one.